This is Between the Brackets, a MediaWiki podcast, episode 14, August 7th, 2018. Welcome to Between the Brackets. I'm Yaron Koren. It's time for another episode that I like to call BTB Digest. It's the episode for the busy MediaWiki enthusiast, or just for people who have heard some of these episodes before but might enjoy hearing the highlights over again. I'll be going here through 5 episodes of the podcast, and we'll hear the clips that I thought were most interesting or relevant to people who want to know about the state of MediaWiki, where it's been, and where it's headed. So the first episode on the list is the one I recorded in April with Daren, Welsh, and James Montalvo of NASA, who've overseen a pretty remarkable adoption of MediaWiki there since they first set up an internal wiki in 2011. Here's James talking about the change in attitude toward wikis and MediaWiki at NASA since 2011.
One big difference between now and 2011, 2012 timeframe is if we were in a kind of our group's weekly meeting and somebody mentioned wiki, then it was kind of like cringe and be fearful while everybody may come down on us for, we don't like this or we're whatever nervous about using this new platform or whatever. Whereas now, our group meetings, the word wiki is said dozens of times. And if anything, I'm more concerned about how aggressively people want to use it for every new thing, which it may not even always be the right choice. Like sometimes we have to push back and say, well, we already have this other thing that supports that, or why don't we use Imagery Online for those? Imagery Online is one of our image databases. Why don't we use that because that already exists and they have a contract for it, and it's one less thing we have to manage, that kind of thing. So it's definitely flipped a lot from that perspective.
And in the next clip, James and Daren talk about the usefulness of not starting a new wiki from scratch, but instead importing its content from an existing system, which is good advice for anyone starting a wiki at an organization.
Think about what Daren was just saying about importing from some content. So there's things like Pandoc that you can use to convert Word documents to wiki text and lots of other different formats. But and we for one wiki, they had a SharePoint wiki, and we kind of wrote a scraper to pull all the content off of that website and pull it into MediaWiki. And so that got, even though they only really had one person to start them out, they pulled in years of content. Had 1,000 wiki pages created basically instantly. So it was a pretty easy transition for them.
About BNE, they had a Word document that was like hundreds of pages, or
there was one group that had a 800-page Word document that it took several minutes to just open up, and I don't remember if they broke it up or what, but starting with some source. Any enterprise use case like us has got something that they wish was better. Otherwise, why would they be? They're not likely just starting totally from scratch. They have something that can probably be converted, and figuring out how to convert that and using a computer to do as much of the work as possible is definitely the way to go.
The next episode featured Dan Barrett. In the MediaWiki community, Dan is best known for writing the O'Reilly book on MediaWiki, which came out in 2007 and was the definitive MediaWiki reference book for years afterward. He's also written other technical books for O'Reilly on other topics. In the interview, Dan said that the one part of his MediaWiki book that he is most proud of and that is held up even 10 years later is the chapter on the non-technical aspects of bringing MediaWiki into an organization and convincing management and users to use it. So to that end, I asked him about how he and his team got everyone to use the wiki at his own company, Vistaprint, and here was his response.
First of all, after creating a MediaWiki install and so forth, I did something that Wikipedia says don't do, which is, remember those 1,000 article titles or article topics I mentioned before, or 1,000 topics that new people need to know.
Right.
I created one article for each, blank.
Oh, okay.
And Wikipedia says no blank articles, so I organized them into about 150 categories and released this empty but structured wiki to a group of about 20 pilot testers and said, please start putting your information in here. I've already kind of pre-formatted the wiki for you, so you don't have to decide where the information goes.
Right.
If you want to write about bug tracking, there's a bug tracking page. Sure, there's nothing on it, but just put anything you want there. Don't worry about structure and content too much. Just get it in there. And the pilot group had a really easy time with it. And they were all engineers, so they had no trouble with wiki text. And so once that appeared to be successful, we let the rest of the technology organization in. And every single day, I had a regimen that I followed, which was what were all the articles created yesterday. Look at each one, make sure it has an introduction, make sure it has a good title, the strong first word, and a couple of other simple standards to it. Make sure it's categorized properly, and every day reorganize.
Oh, really?
Yes, that was my life for about 2 months. In addition, using various special pages, it was pretty easy to keep up with what was going on. It was only, 100 people or so using the system, which is pretty small. And so, along with that, I also monitored every technical mailing list in the company. I subscribed. And every time I saw somebody put something in an article in an email, every time I saw somebody put something in an email that looked like knowledge that could last longer than just the email, I would do a reply all and say, thank you so much for writing down this excellent piece of information. Please put it on this wiki page. And I gave the URL. And after a month of doing this, I was able to stop because people were doing it on their own. They started realizing the benefits of a central repository of knowledge instead of emails that just evaporate or everybody has to keep their own copy in their mailbox and search for it and so on. So social pressure started to form organically where you'd be in a meeting and somebody would say, well, is that on the wiki? And people would say, yes, it is. Or if they said no, they knew that after the meeting they were going to go back to their desk and put it up there because people started expecting it. And so I guess lesson number 2 is build that social pressure. Keep up the monitoring of what's going on around you. Make sure everybody understands the value of getting that information into that central repository. Because once it's there, everybody has to answer fewer questions from people who stop by their desks. They say, it's on the wiki, have a look.
Right.
And that kind of reasoned discussion had a very quick positive impact on the software development community within Vistaprint. So there were no skeptics after a few months.
He also talked about a few gamification type approaches that his team at Vistaprint had for increasing contributions to the wiki, one of them being to let people serve as official curators for specific articles. Here he is talking about that program.
Now, in a wiki, you don't have access control and ownership like you do in a SharePoint site or some other more rigidly controlled intranet. And we wanted to preserve that. So we came up with a concept of not an owner of a wiki page, but a curator, somebody who just cared enough about the material to want to keep it up to date.
Right.
And so we had this feature where you could sign up with a click to be a curator of any article you want. It didn't matter if you'd written it, didn't matter what your relationship to the content or the subject was. You could be a curator if you just cared. And so this was very wiki-ish in some sense because nobody was excluded. And when you were a curator, you got a couple of benefits. One was that you were automatically watching the article. So at this point, there's no real advantage to curation over watching, but it would do that so you would get an alert when an article changed.
Right.
But you could also set a timer that said, I want to be alerted in 6 months that this article needs to be looked at. And that is then what happened. You would get an email when the article, 6 months later, that would say, hey, your own. The article on designing a wiki with multi-colors is out of date, or it hasn't been looked at for 6 months. So come on and look at it. And then you would look at it and you'd change it and you'd recertify it for another 6 months. And so we had curator days where we get people to sign up to be curators, and it also caused their name to appear on the page as a curator, which was a double-edged sword because some users would look at it and say, oh, this page is owned by someone else, I better not modify it. So even though we never told people they couldn't modify it, just the appearance of someone's name on the page made it, there was just a discouragement factor that happened that we hadn't anticipated. So we had to deal with that as well.
I should note that Dan later clarified that despite the problems, having curators still overall increased the amount of contributions, in his opinion. So the next episode of Between the Brackets was the first BTB Digest episode. Now I could go meta at this point and include some clips from that one, but instead let's skip right to the next episode, episode 9, which featured Kunal Mehta, who is a developer for the Wikimedia Foundation. Though as it turns out, he may be leaving before too long to go work in journalism, but that's another story. One of Kunal's big successes was getting just about every extension to include a file called extension.json, which specifies each extension's classes, settings, hooks, etc. I asked Kunal about how he was able to take an idea like extension.json and get enough buy-in, as they say, from others to get it implemented throughout the code. He was very big on the concept of RFCs, or requests for comment.
I think the RFC process is a really good one, in that, the RFC process forces everyone to pay attention to you, or to your idea, because there is a time deadline, in that, eventually, after a few weeks, if there are no objections raised, TechCom will approve the RFC, and at that point you have, someone's already, you've already gotten the official thumbs up to go ahead. So the RFC process really, it forces people to pay attention, and, it gets people to say their ideas and their thoughts. And I think, the RFC process is really helpful in, fleshing out ideas and taking, good concepts and turning them into good implementations. The first major RFC that I really did was the extension.json one. And, if the proposal that I initially put forward, got approved and was implemented with no changes, it would have been a disaster. There were a lot of suggestions and changes that were made during the drafting and discussion phase that really played a key part in making it a success.
Yeah, even the name extension.json came from someone else, no?
Yes, it did. My initial proposal was info.json.
Okay. Well, yeah. Besides being a MediaWiki developer, Kunal is also a member of the Free Software Foundation. Here's what he had to say about why he tries to use free software, i.e. open source software, whenever possible.
I think there are just practical issues in using proprietary software that really make it so that free software is just better. And there's also a moral sense that I am a member of the free software movement, and if I need to support free software, and the best way to support free software is to just use free software, and, convince other people to use it based on the merits. As is life, I do use some proprietary software. My phone has the googly bits on it, that, for practical reasons I can't get away from yet. But, I think generally in most areas where I have the opportunity to use free software, I'll take it.
Next, I talked to Ben Fletcher, who does IT work for the UK Ministry of Defence. Ben's enthusiasm for MediaWiki and Semantic MediaWiki, which they make heavy use of, really came through, and here he is talking about spreading that enthusiasm to others.
I really struggle to understand the power of Semantic MediaWiki when I first sort of went through the documentation. It's a difficult concept to initially understand, but when you get it, suddenly this light bulb, it's quite it's quite funny when I explain it to people. I can see, you can see their eyes glazing over, and then suddenly they get it, and you just see their eyes light up, and you can see the light bulb moment, and suddenly they go, "Wait, you can do this," and you go, "Yeah," and you can do that, and suddenly people get really, really passionate about it, and go, "Oh my God, that's incredible," And I think if people really understood the power of Semantic MediaWiki, it would just accelerate. I really do believe that.
One interesting goal of Ben's is to use MediaWiki as a DevOps or development operations catalog. Creating software to support DevOps has become an increasingly big deal in the last 10 years or so. I don't know of anyone using MediaWiki to do this at the moment, but Ben made a compelling case for it.
One of my long-term proposals is, why could we not look at the delivery of capability captured within a wiki using forms? And what I mean by that is, so the business requirement comes along, a wiki, people discuss it, it iterates, it goes back and forth, and then it starts going through. We look at the policy and the application of that policy, and again that starts adding up, and then this capability, the description of this capability starts to develop on the wiki. That would be that's aside from the policy, but to me could be another use of how MediaWiki and Semantic MediaWiki could be used in the future, because then you have this historic record of how something's developed, why decisions were made, and what they were based on. But also, even more importantly, you could have a capability that could have all of its functionality understood in one place. What system what operating system it sits on, what interactions it has with other systems, all those different things, which would make configuration management, change management, all those sort of things a lot easier and a lot very quick to understand, far more easier to understand the impact of change within the organization. Or a simple example, you need to upgrade your Java. So, how can we search across all our systems and make sure that we've captured every single one? It's a challenge that most industry is struggling with at the moment.
Yeah, that's interesting. So MediaWiki could become essentially a part of the quote unquote DevOps system.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that is quite interesting. I'm not aware of that being done, but there's no reason why it couldn't or shouldn't.
Yeah, definitely no reason why it shouldn't.
And the final episode included in this BTB Digest was the interview with German professor Markus Krötzsch, which I called a very special episode of Between the Brackets because Markus was so instrumental in creating Semantic MediaWiki and, to a lesser extent, Wikidata, both alongside Denny Vrandicic. And SMW and Wikidata are, in my opinion, two of the most important innovations in the history of MediaWiki, and really in the history of wikis. I asked Markus to recount the beginnings of Semantic MediaWiki, which was also the beginning of Markus and Denny's involvement in MediaWiki. It's a story I find fascinating because it's so delightfully random. Basically, it's possible that none of this would have happened if the first Wikimania had been held somewhere other than Frankfurt, Germany.
So this was back in 2005, I guess, when the first Wikimania conference was scheduled. So this was the first Wikimedia event ever. And by chance, it was scheduled to happen in Frankfurt, which was very close to our location at the time in Karlsruhe. So Danny and I were big Wikipedia fans, which was not such a standard thing in these days. So many people didn't even know Wikipedia yet. And because it was so close, we just thought we have to go there and do something. So we get together and thought, well, what can we actually make or contribute based on our research, based also on our technical expertise that would somehow be useful for Wikipedia as such. And since we were in a semantic web research group and just had it started working on our PhD thesis there, we thought, well, why not do something which has to do with machine understandable data and how you can help people work with Wikipedia based on whatever machine intelligence you could offer based on this. So the very naive idea was that as soon as you made some even small part of Wikipedia machine readable, wonderful things would happen, and automatically somehow things would fall into place and applications would emerge and the world would be a better place. And so with this idea, we just went to Wikimania and said, here's our idea. Let's annotate data. Let's have some machine readability there. And it's going to be a little project. It's not going to make a lot of difference to what you're doing now. And in a few days, a lot can be accomplished there. And we gave a talk on this very idea. Without any intention to implement anything ourselves, to be honest. So we didn't have any experience in PHP or any of the software underlying Wikipedia. So we definitely didn't want to start a software project with us as the developers. We rather thought of this as an initial idea, right? And Danny, who gave the talk at this time, explicitly asked the audience for help and for support, and asked people to come forward to help implement this idea in MediaWiki. And we were lucky that somebody actually did that. So the company DocCheck at the time approached us and said, well, what do you think? How much time will it take to realize? And we said, well, maybe 2-3 weeks of development time. and this is how it started. It wasn't 3 weeks in the end, but that at least was our beginning.
And for the final clip of the show, Markus talked about the continued usefulness of Semantic MediaWiki for rapid prototyping. I have to quibble with his statement that SMW is unique in this, since the now 3-year-old cargo extension can support very similar things, but his overall point still stands.
One thing where Semantic MediaWiki has always been special was that you could use it in a unique way for prototyping data-driven websites. So you could create websites which are built on top of data, but in a way where you do not have to know upfront what your data structures are in detail. So it was very different in its approach from traditional relational database applications, maybe where you would have a certain schema and you have a certain table and the table has certain columns and that's what you store there. And you know that upfront, and every object of this type has these data properties and every object of that other type has these other data properties. Semantic MediaWiki was not like that. It always considered properties as the first-class citizen and allowed you to add properties to any object you like. Now, that of course creates some, it's a bit vague, right? It makes it hard for people to use if you only give them that. And then, as you said, what came along was this notion of template-based editing of forms. That was, of course, mainly your achievement of getting this to work, which allowed people to create input masks that would suggest which properties to use and would enable them to just use a certain set of properties and make it much easier for them to find the right properties for a certain type of objects and also to format them in a meaningful way. But what was really great, I think, was the combination of both, because today when I start a Semantic MediaWiki site, I can just make a simple form, a simple type of object, and I can start using it and add users to it and they can start using it. And then if in a month or so I suddenly realize I need another property in this object, I just add this property to the site, I change the form a bit, so suddenly it will have a new input. And Semantic MediaWiki is completely fine with that. So I don't have to change any schema for this. I can just dynamically add and also remove data. And even in the running system where I already have objects, it will not cause any problem. I can handle this. So this flexibility, I think, is a really strong point. That you are not locked into a rigid form, which is just based on a single table structure, but you can somehow grow from a given object model, which is on top of the actual technical data model underneath. So the technical model does not constrain what you do in your application. You can change it later on. I think that was very useful.
So that's it for BTB Digest. I hope you enjoyed these clips, and I'll see you next time when we're back with an all-new guest.